What's going on, everybody? So in this video, we are going to be covering what's going on in the NFT and crypto markets. Now, before we go ahead and get started, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, when we're looking at the crypto markets in general, nothing too crazy compared to yesterday. You know, Ethereum's at that 1.2, Bitcoin is at 16K. So for the most part, everything kind of moving sideways. And fortunately, everything's not crashing with the whole FTX thing going on. So let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is actually going to be one of the more hype projects that is coming out, and that is going to be Valhalla. Alex, who is the CEO and founder of Valhalla, he actually came out with this thread, this tweet, and also a video as well that you can watch, just kind of explaining like everything about what Valhalla is. Essentially, it's almost like a sales page or a landing page where people can get an idea and decide whether or not they will want to mint. Now, breaking this down a little bit, you know, there's some mixed feelings about it. Some people on one side are just so bullish on the fact that this is a NFT project for the gaming and esports niche, which is kind of a blue ocean territory where, you know, I think they are one of the first people to kind of get into that space in a bigger way. Now, other people are saying like 0.5 ETH, which is the price of the mint, is too high. And I can definitely see arguments on both sides, but let's go ahead and get into it, right? So what is Valhalla? It is a crypto native brand for gamers, right? They're not really like promising exactly like what is going to happen after mint. They're kind of saying like, this is our community, and then with our community, we will figure it out. And the first thing that we are going to create is going to be this PFP. Now, PFPs can be very powerful because CloneX is a PFP, Azuki is a PFP, and we've seen from those projects, even Moonbirds and Doodles, you can do a lot more with just a PFP. But the main important thing is if you have a real community that wants to be around, right? It's going to be a digital avatar, fashion brand, and representing gaming culture, right? So I kind of see it something like maybe 100 Thieves or FaZe Clan, right? So these are like gaming organizations that are tapping into fashion as well, selling product, sponsoring esports teams, which now has a lot of partnerships with different esports teams. So I can kind of see where that's coming from. They kind of share what their team is, the CEO, the background behind Alex, and you can check out this post and see his LinkedIn and his accolades. Artist, investor, so they have a lot of investors. You can see like the CEO of GOAT, CEO of Scale, CEO of Nothing. So these are actually like pretty big companies. The price that they're going to propose is going to be 0.5, and how they're doing that is they're using industry benchmarks. So they're saying like, okay, like we're doing 0.5, Azuki was 1 ETH, PXN was 2 ETH, CloneX was 3 ETH, right? So they're basically saying we are the cheapest. And then when you look at it from a USD comparison, they are also the cheapest, right? It looks very cheap from that perspective, but I think the thing people have to keep in mind is that when these projects minted out, CloneX, PXN, and Azuki, we were in a different time. We were in a bull market where a lot of things were just minting out like crazy. So you can't really put it side by side like that, in my opinion. You know, you have to like share that, hey, you know, the market's completely different compared to where it's before. So that's why, you know, some people might say 0.5 is a good deal relative to the other projects who are kind of similar, right? And other people are like, oh my God, 0.5 is too expensive because we're in a bear market, right? And so there's always going to be different opinions on both sides. Who's right, who's wrong? It actually doesn't really matter because it is created based on perception. So perceived value is everything. So if someone perceives this worthy of 0.5, to them, it's valuable, right? You cannot tell someone it's not valuable because that's their opinion. Just like how, you know, if you buy Gucci sunglasses, for example, right? Like some people don't value that, some people do value it, right? You can't tell people what they value. It's up to them. There's this bidding process, and to be completely transparent, I was one of the winners, fortunately, of this bidding thing, right? The criticism that people have is they're saying that like there's only 500 spots or whitelist spots, and then 16,000 people applied, so that's like 3,000 oversubscribed, right? But it doesn't really paint the full picture because, like, of course, like if you're only offering 500 and everyone applies, yes, there is demand for it, but there's only 500 spots. So like, you can't just be like, oh, it's like 3,000, you know, oversubscribed, because it's like, well, that's if the supply was 500. Now, if the supply is 10,000, how oversubscribed would it be? Would it even be oversubscribed, right? That's a whole nother question that this graphic doesn't really represent. Using these numbers is not really a fair representation of what the price should be. Now, again, it's all perceived value. That's just my personal take, and a lot of people are thinking it as well. So it's not like I'm like revealing any secrets, but that's definitely a thought, right? So these are the people that, you know, social proof, obviously. So these are the people that bid, and I'm also one of them. So just full transparency on that. Then the last piece is that basically what they're going to do is they're going to save 1,000 of the supply and then just auction it off every single day. The reasoning is to answer declining creator royalties. We held back 1K supply. So I guess they think that they're not going to make as much on royalties compared to before. So this is another way to generate revenue off their mint. So they also have a marketplace. And I think overall the project's really hyped. I think they have a strong niche where, you know, they're really just tapping into like the gaming culture, right? So there's already a market for this. They already have money. So most likely it's going to mint out, right? And even if it's 0.5 mint, some people say it's expensive. Some people will not say it's expensive, and they'll probably just sell out anyways because hype, right? I think people are wondering like, how is the NFT going to connect to the Stack platform? And then does it feel like two different companies are being built at the same time? In a ways, yes, but do they all interconnect in some way? Maybe. Very different opinions on that, and because we're so new to the space, like everything can sound believable and everything is possible if someone is to figure it out. I just want to give you my personal take on it and be as neutral as possible and give you the information, give you my thoughts, and they're really opinions, and let you make your own decisions on how you feel about the project, whether you feel bullish or whatever the case is. You know, I visited the Val office before, you know, I posted on Twitter and stuff like that, so it's like, consider these people friends of mine. But again, I always got to be fair. I got to always give them what I'm thinking, and you know, having criticism is good because it allows a project to think about like their decisions and also make improvements as well. All right, so the next project that we're gonna talk about is gonna be Adidas Original. So obviously they came out with this little trailer or teaser over here where they have like a bunch of clothes of these people wearing these Adidas 3D avatars. Now, so when I'm looking at the art, you know, for me, I think it's pretty cool. It's good in that it's really very 3D realistic and stuff like that, and I could see, you know, people potentially wearing it in the metaverse. But I feel like because they're using like these black characters, right, who are just like kind of like shadows, it doesn't hit as hard compared to, let's say, a Clone X modeling something. So that's a learning lesson in that having a real character wear the clothes is actually pretty important when it comes to like marketing and getting people excited about something. And then for me, I feel like they're not bad, but then I feel like it's not really hitting that Web3 vibe. It's not like, you know, a grand slam of like, oh my god, this is what the market needs. And I feel like they can like tweak it a little bit more and do different changes to hit the market more. But again, you know, I'm not a creative director. You know, I'm not trying to hate on anyone's art. Like, there's definitely room for improvement in terms of like positioning and what clothes you put out to really hit the market. Now, if you want to buy the stuff, it's on Adidas Impossible box. You can find it on OpenSea. Okay, so when I'm looking at the details of this, it's going to be a mix of impossible silhouettes and virtual and physical. So virtual gear, okay, a lot of variations and 8 silhouettes. All right, so when you go on the website, you can actually see the clothes. It's not bad. I mean, if you're into this stuff, you want to wear this in the metaverse and this is your style, definitely check it out. Now let's go ahead and talk about some more indie projects. There is a studio, or call it a project or company, called Zero.Fun, and it's by my fellow YouTube creator Giancarlo. So he basically started the studio where he's basically running these experiments, like these NFT experiments, to see like what's cool, what's fun, and hopefully make a little money about it. So this is website, obviously very basic, right? So the first project they are putting out is called Prometheans, which is the mint is live right now. The website, then you can mint it, and so it's kind of like an on-chain game. There's like certain mechanics where these guys have to like keep a fire alive or something like that. If you want to learn more about it, you can go on Giancarlo's Twitter. He has a whole thread about like how the mechanics work, so it's pretty cool. But I would say, like, you know, this kind of things is very niche, right? I feel like as the space continues to evolve, there's only a certain demographic that really cares if something is on-chain, especially like these on-chain games. And because there's going to be so many people who are creating games that are very like Web2 native feeling, where you can like play it on your mobile device, you can find it on the App Store, and they're going to have NFTs. I feel like that's kind of where the space is moving, where it's just regular game developers are moving into the space, but they still happen to also sell NFTs like very low key. I mean, I think there always will be a place for these niche on-chain audiences. Like there's Ether Orcs, right? Prometheans, which is this one. Anonymized is also another on-chain project, right? That's really big on that. But when we're talking about capturing the mainstream audience, you know, like the regular person who doesn't even know what on-chain is, like there has to be a different narrative. But for the right person, this is something that may be interesting if you want to check it out. Now, let's go ahead and talk about more mainstream things. In other news, Pudgy Penguins recently did a license partnership to Kellogg's. Kellogg's is basically using these Pudgy Penguins on their cereal. Now, that is a big win for the NFT scene in general, just because it's an NFT project collaborating with pretty iconic, you know, Tony the Tiger over here, right? Now, the interesting part I'm curious about is whether or not having a penguin on the cereal box would generate more sales, because do kids know what Pudgy Penguins is? Because like the holders who are buying Pudgy Penguins, they're usually adults, right? So are adults also buying cereal? Like what's that demographic looking like? I don't have all the data, but those are really things to consider when it comes to, you know, whether or not a NFT project will be successful with its collaborations. Like we also see Gary Vee selling like his V Friends toys and Toys R Us, right? So, you know, it's interesting because it's like, is it the parents that go to Toys R Us and they're buying the toys for their kids? And I'm sure there's more deeper insights to that. I'm not an expert when it comes to marketing the kids, but interesting indeed. And speaking of like mainstream stuff, Azuki is going to be one of the sponsors for Oracle Red Bull Racing. It's going to be like a Grand Prix thing where you get the F1 drivers racing against each other, and racing is becoming a very big sport actually. Like we've seen like Netflix documentaries about that, which actually propelled this sport into more popularity. So it's pretty interesting that Azuki would choose this particular event to be a sponsor. So we have like Oracle, Red Bull, Bybit, and then Azuki over here, right? So Bybit is going to be like exchange, and then Azuki on the bottom. So probably pretty expensive to do this. And I suppose, you know, the return on investment is that it gets more exposure, and it's like Azuki is like the only one that can do this, right? And of course, like we don't know how much it costs. Maybe they got some deals going on. Maybe they got some connections with people who run the organization, but it's pretty cool that NFT project is able to kind of branch out to Web 2 into Web Web3. Now, a caveat I would say is that, you know, during the last bull run, we saw Cool Cats actually have advertisements on a NASCAR, on like an actual car for NASCAR, right? And so it was cool where people were posting on Twitter and they were saying like, oh my God, like Cool Cats, you know, they're the best because they're breaking into Web 2, right? And then from there, the momentum kind of died off, and then, you know, Cool Cats kind of just like kind of fell from grace in a sense, right? It doesn't mean that just because someone can put their logo or, you know, their NFT on a car or something, that makes it amazing, right? I think that's just part of the formula. So you have to just look at things holistically, where it's like, all right, we're getting some branding, we're getting some exposure, but that's just a piece of the puzzle. So don't be like, I'm gonna buy an Azuki because they partner with like Oracle and Red Bull. You know, that's just, you know, one form of marketing, and you have to look at everything overall. Now, the next project we're gonna talk about is gonna be an upcoming one. And Ethereum co-founder Anthony announced that he is going to be launching Andiami. So when we're going on this page, it's going to be these cubes going on their website. Let's see what's going on. I'm reading on the website. It's very unclear on what it is, unfortunately. And I guess these long articles, like, they're not really explaining exactly what this is about in their website. It's very, very unclear, actually. If you're interested in that, and, you know, this is the co-founder of Ethereum we're talking about, so if you give them a follow, check it out. And as they are more clear on what they're going to be offering as an NFT or whatever the case is, make sure to check that out and follow along. So with that said, that is everything we got to cover for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, and make sure to follow me on Twitter at Patrick Dan, because I'm going to be dropping a fire thread every single day. I'm on that 1 thread per day challenge for the next 30 days, 60 days, maybe 1 year, who knows, right? So if you want to follow along on that, make sure to check out my Twitter at Patrick Dan, and I will see you in the next one.